Hello, and welcome to Banned Books Week and Beyond, Actionable Tools for Libraries, Booksellers, and Authors, presented by United Against Book Bans. I'm Amelia Aldred, Deputy Director for State and Local Advocacy with ALA's Public Policy and Advocacy Office, and I'm also a member of the United Against Book Bans team. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, ALA and Unite would like to thank all of the organizations, libraries, schools, bookstores, publishers, and individuals who are participating in Banned Books Week this year. We also want to thank all of those who cannot join us in open participation. Thank you all for supporting the right to read and showing the world that you believe that we should be freed between the lines. A few notes about our time together today. After hearing from our presenters, we will have a Q&A during the last 10 minutes of the event. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function to pose it, and we will do our best to include your queries as time allows. Additionally, this session is being recorded for asynchronous viewing following the event. Those who are not interested in participating in a recorded event are invited to disconnect at this time. Now, I'm happy to introduce our panelists. Betsy Gomez is Assistant Director of Communications and Public Outreach for ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom and Coordinator for United Against Book Bans and the Banned Books Week Coalition. Betsy is the former Coalition and Editorial Director for the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, an advocacy organization dedicated to the First Amendment rights of the comics community. With more than a decade of professional experience defending intellectual freedom, Gomez also has an extensive background in educational publishing as a content developer and editor. Philomena Polifrone is an advocacy associate manager at the American Booksellers Association, where she's a point person for free expression advocacy. She holds a PhD in English and comparative literature from Columbia University. When she's not reading or advocating for free expression, diverse books, and LGBTQ+ rights, Philomena prefers to be found knitting in Brooklyn, flanked by her beloved cats, Starbuck and Boomer. She's also the author of the newly released ABA Right to Read Handbook, a Reader's Guide to Fighting Book Bans. Nick Higgins is the Chief Librarian at Brooklyn Public Library in charge of public service across Brooklyn. Through the library's Books Unbanned program, which allows young people to browse its digital collection regardless of where they live in the US, Nick and his team at BPL have led the charge to provide free access to books that are being challenged and removed from library shelves across the country. In his previous role as Director of Outreach Services for BPL, Nick and his team created a suite of unique programs for older adults, individuals, and families impacted by the justice system, immigrants, and people experiencing homelessness. In 2017, Nick was named Mover and Shaker by Library Journal for creating a citywide library-based video visiting service for kids with parents incarcerated on Rikers Island. And in 2023, he was featured on the Time 100 Next list for his works with Books Unbanned, which has since expanded to public library systems in Seattle, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Boston. And finally, Becca Brown is a digital strategist with this coalition and will be talking about social media support for the October 19th Freedom to Read Community Day of Action. And with that, I'll pass the microphone to Betsy Gomez.
Thank you for the introduction, Amelia, and I'm so happy to be here and among these amazing people. So I want to talk a little bit about Banned Books Week, the reason we're all here. So for those of you who don't know, Banned Books Week started in 1982. This isn't a new event. We've been at this for a little while because the censors have been at this for a little while. We started in 1982 because there was a rash of censorship around the country, not unlike we're seeing now. Probably not on the scale we're seeing now, but it got pretty bad in 1982. And so the American Library Association, the American Booksellers Association, a number of different organizations got together to collaborate on this information campaign to inform the public about the fact that censorship's happening, what's being targeted, and the impact of censorship. Last year, we started our first ever day of action during Banned Books Week, Let Freedom Read Day. And so I want to talk to y'all about Let Freedom Read Day, which is happening again this year. It's happening on Saturday. And we really wanted to encourage people who are engaging with Banned Books Week and engaging with advocacy to do just one thing, just take the day and do one thing. And really, we wanted to make it accessible as well. So you really only just need like 5 minutes to do that one thing, depending, and if you have more time available, obviously do more. But really, every small thing that we do to fight censorship adds up. It increases the ripples in the pond, so to speak. And the more people we have advocating in small and large ways, the more successful we'll be in combating censorship. So for Let Freedom Read Day, the 2024 edition, we're focusing on voting this year. Obvious reason for that. There's a big election coming up this fall. And so we are encouraging people to register to vote. If you're not registered, or if you're already registered, check your registration, make sure it's up to date. We'd also like to encourage people to take the Freedom to Read Voter Pledge, which is a pledge available on the United Against Book Bans website that basically says, hey, I'm voting for the freedom to read. I'm going to choose candidates and policies that support keeping books in schools and libraries. If you have more time, if you have 15 minutes, spend some time finding out what's on your ballot. Are there positions in your local government up for election, and will those people influence decisions about schools and libraries? Are there propositions or ballot measures that might impact schools, libraries, and booksellers? Know what you're voting for, and vote for everything that you could possibly do, so that in every way that you possibly could do so to support the freedom to read. I talk about this kind of epidemic of censorship as a national problem that's happening at the local level. And so local elections do matter, and local ballots matter. If you have more time, spend some time talking to your candidates. Ask them where they stand on book bans. Another resource the United Against Book Bans offers is a candidate questionnaire that you can use you can send them the questionnaire, you can take the questionnaire to a town hall, you can, in some cases, some candidates will actually answer the phone when you call. You can ask them about what they think about book bans and where they stand on the freedom to read. And finally, if you have more time, if you have an hour or more, attend a town hall or a rally and help your community prepare for elections. You can host a nonpartisan in-person event to talk about voter registration, nonpartisan issues, and libraries, bookstores, and a lot of community centers are a great way to partner on an event like that. I'd encourage everybody to visit the Let Freedom Read Day website, which is hosted on bandbooksweek.org for some more ideas, because beyond voting, there are so many other things you can do, from calling a decision maker, supporting an advocacy organization like the organizations represented here, joining United Against Book Bans, checking out a band's book. Circulation matters. Buying a banned book, donating that banned book to a little free library or to a book drive, writing letters to decision makers, letters to the editor, planning to attend a school board meeting, a city council meeting, meetings where decisions are being made about book bans. And then spend some time at your local library. Volunteer. The libraries are almost always looking for help, and so spend some time so you can get a firsthand accounting of what's happening in your library and how you can best support your library workers. So really, Let Freedom Read Day is all about doing just one thing, whether it's a 5-minute thing or if it's something that takes you all day, to help fight censorship. Another thing I would encourage y'all to do, just to repeat this, is joining United Against Book Bans, because United Against Book Bans is a campaign that and a coalition effort that ALA launched in 2022 to promote public advocacy against censorship. We know that 70% of the population does not support book bans, does not support the censorship, and we need those people to show up. And so under United Against Book Bans, we can send communications to you to let you know when there is a board meeting or an event in your community that we need people at. We work with advocates on the ground, providing one-on-one advice and guidance. We have a toolkit for advocates. We provide a lot of resources. And with that, I want to pass the torch on to Nick to talk about a really important project that we're partnering with them on.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Betsy. Hi, everyone. I'm going to probably just widen the lens to a 70 millimeter. I've got some guests here in the room. We're all part of the same team that is working on this project that Betsy just mentioned. So Thank you so much, Betsy. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you, Lainey, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. We're so happy to be here with our esteemed colleagues on this call, and just really wonderful to be part of this partnership on this effort. So maybe I'll just introduce you, or have my colleagues introduce themselves as special guests here.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Lester-Kenton, and I'm BPL's Executive VP of External Affairs.
And I'm Damaris Olivo, and I'm BPL's AVP of Marketing and Communications.
And we just, yeah, great. And we have everything is very porous here in Brooklyn. We open each other's doors and walk in. So really happy to be part of this conversation with everyone. I'm here. I'm Nick Higgins. I'm the Chief Librarian at Brooklyn Public Library, and I'm here to talk about another, as Betsy mentioned, another event that's coming up down the pike. It is the Freedom to Read Day of Action that is going to take place on October 19th. This is a day where libraries big and small in towns and cities all across the country, in bookstores and places of worship, in community centers, and by individuals. We're going to see a lot of people coming out for events, virtual events, social media activation, and rallies and marches and all kinds of energy and activation around the value of freedom to read, and in support of libraries and public institutions in general. This is, again, on October 19th. There's a cadence to this that was very intentional. We wanted to marshal a lot of the energy that we're feeling kind of being drawn into and out of Banned Books Week, leading into Let Freedom Read Day, as Betsy mentioned, carrying that over into these activations all across the United States on October 19th for the National Freedom to Read Day of Action. And then really just carry that energy and that momentum, hopefully to the polls on November 5th, not to vote for any one particular candidate or list of candidates, but just to get in the practice of going out into the world and looking each other in the eye and talking about what's really important to you, understanding sort of the issues that are at play and are at risk, and transferring that into action, which does include going out and voting on November 5th. Of course, carrying the momentum. There's also November 6th and beyond. We certainly want to keep the momentum going with the collaboration and partnership with everyone here on this call and beyond. So the Day of Action, we've been getting questions about, what's the reason, why now? And, the answer is that, there's never been a better time to tell a positive story about what these institutions, what these libraries, what the freedom to read means for people, particularly because it has been at such great risk over the past handful of years. We channel, Dr. Emily Knox, who, talks about the freedom to read as something that's been settled, or at least we think it's been settled up until about 4 or 5 years ago, that it's a value that everyone in this country shares, everyone can get behind, everyone knows, and even takes it for granted. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, libertarian, any of my cousins in Kirksville, Missouri, or Eldora, Iowa, whatever they believe, they also believe that everyone has a right to read whatever they want, and they have no business telling other people what they should or shouldn't read. It's a universal accepted value, but there's also been a counter narrative that's been really powerful, and it's also been beginning to get rooted over the past few years, that there are books, there are voices that aren't appropriate to be involved in the public discourse or be included in the public discourse. And by extension, there are people in our communities that don't belong in our community spaces. And by extension, that there are public institutions that are expressions of democracy and our aspirations toward pluralism that should be reined in, that should be eroded. And so this is a perfect time to tell what is really the positive story about these public institutions, and it's really about reminding people that we do have this universal value that we all share, no matter what our political affiliation and what our other beliefs are. So this is the time to get out and call everyone together, again, as much as we possibly can across the country in person, to talk to one another about what we believe and what we stand for. So we wanted the National Day of Action on October 19th, sorry, oh my goodness, to center on what we're for, not necessarily what we're against. So in any campaign, you have that choice to either go out there and say, you know, we are defending against something that's being brought to us, that's happening to us, which, you know, listen, we're all kind of, you know, ragged and kind of weary about, and sort of like also surprised that this is coming to our doorsteps in libraries and schools and in bookstores. So, you know, we have to defend, you know, our rights and our right to be and belong with everything that we have, and push back certainly against what's happening to us. But there's also an opportunity here to really talk about what we're for, what we stand for, what we believe, and what we aspire to be. So the language around this campaign is very intentional. This is a day of action around the freedom to read. We are for the freedom to read. Of course, we wouldn't have to have that language, we wouldn't have to have this campaign if we weren't being persistently and constantly attacked with book bans and challenges and being shouted at across the reference desk and getting shouted down at school board meetings. So it goes hand in hand, I think, with everything else. But the top line is that we are for the freedom to read. It's a universal value that speaks to not only the library audience or the bookstore audience, but importantly, as Betsy mentioned, like we really want to reach those folks who might not have, you know, come to a library, you know, in 20 years, or you know, aren't book readers, but understand that there are these public institutions that are at risk of being lost, and what that means more globally to our democratic experiment here in the United States, and really speak to them and invite them in, and so they can participate. I might just go into, you know, talking about sort of like where we're at right now. We launched this campaign officially, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. And right now we're sitting at around 300 signups for some kind of activity on the day of action on the 19th. We've reached right around 35 states where there's going to be an in-person activation. We're getting the word out to a lot more partners. So if there's anyone on this call who's interested in joining, signing up, please do so. And let us know what you want to do, what you need help with. There's a range of activities that you can do. Not everyone is going to host an in-person event. Not everyone's going to host a rally. You know, some people might want to do something online. Some people aren't going to be able to do anything for fear of, you know, having too much of a spotlight on them, and that's entirely understandable. So I would just, you know, urge anyone here who has the privilege in their community to host an event, to speak out on social media that day on October 19th, to please do so. Not only for your community where you are, but also for those communities who really can't speak out on behalf of their libraries and their educators, and do it in solidarity and support of them as well. Maybe we can go over to, I'm going to pass this over to Robin. I think we'll talk a little bit about the outreach strategy.
Sure. So we just wanted to give everyone some updates on how we're going to go about promoting this event nationally, just to make sure that it is that folks across the country are well aware that this is happening. They know where to go to find their local event, etc. We are going to be launching fairly soon some digital ads on Meta, on Facebook and Instagram. Messages being, this is for the public to come to an event. So to come join us, to find an event and learn more about the day of action. All of these ads will link back to the beautiful website for the event that our ALA partners set up for us. The great thing about doing these social ads is that they can be optimized. They're going to be tracked very carefully to see which is performing best. What tweaks do we need to make, just to make sure we're getting the clicks and the conversions that we want from those ads. The website, for those of you who are interested in having an event, has everything you need. One-stop shop. There is tips on how to set up an event, talking points for your community. There's a sample press advisory should you want that. There are also a whole suite of graphics you can use. So for your social accounts, as well as posters and flyers you can print that are very customizable. So as Nick mentioned, we know that one type of event isn't necessarily going to be appropriate for everyone. So some of the materials say rally, some of them do mention book bans. This allows you to customize them based on the event that you're going to have, and also allows us to really have the consistency of having the same branding across the country. So folks hopefully will be seeing these ads. They'll see a flyer at our local library and make the connection that this is part of that day of action. We're also hoping to frame this as one of the, if not the largest single day of days of action that we've had nationally around this issue, to really get people excited and hope that they come out and join us. So I will now turn it to my colleague Damaris to talk a little bit more about our press strategy.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so as Robin said, we're so excited to frame this as one of the largest, single day efforts in the fight against book bans. So we will be sending, as we get closer to the day of action, we'll be sending out a nationwide release. We, as Robin mentioned, on the day of action site, you'll find draft templates for a press advisory. So if you are having an event in your community, you can customize that to suit whatever your needs are. And then we will also be pitching op-eds locally here in New York City. So we really encourage you to do the same in your communities. If there are any local publications that you think might be interested in publishing an op-ed on the day of action, yes, we encourage everyone to reach out to their local news outlets on this effort. And then just on social media, if you have any notable voices in your communities in the fight against book bans, or influencers that you think could amplify the message, we also encourage you to reach out to those folks to get them to talk about the efforts on the day of action on October 19th. And then if you want to coordinate media efforts or need assistance or have any questions, you can always reach out to us here at BPL. I see Becca is also on the call for Berlin Rosen, but you can email media@bklynlibrary.org. And we're happy to coordinate on any media efforts. And then as far as in-person events, I know Nick and Robin just kind of went over what those could look like, but they can be as small or as large as you want them to be. So it could be anything from a big rally to story time to film screening. So there are some suggestions on the website for the day of action on potential in-person activations. And yeah, we're so excited to work with everyone on this and looking forward to a successful day.
And great. And thanks Damaris, thanks Robin. I mean, really, this is any activity really helps. Anything that you can do, and we'd love to see all 50 states represented here, as many communities we can possibly get to support their librarians and their educators and bookstore owners and writers and readers. It would be really great. I mean, just as an example, in Alabama, just for a couple of really concrete ones. In Alabama, a local business will have a booth at a Halloween community event focused on the Freedom to Read Day of Action. They'll talk with people about how to recognize scary stories people are telling about books. That's really cute. Rhode Island, they're going to have patrons. They're going to invite them to check out a banned book during Banned Books Week now, and then come back on the 19th to have book discussion about it as a community. Texas, there's going to be a postcard party with the intention of reaching out to school librarians to let them know that they're supported and that we're here for them. Utah is going to host a read-in with board members and the mayor. Following the event, attendees can take a book that they like into quiet corners of the library and just read the book. Imagine that with no government interference, they say. So there are a lot of really creative ways to get involved and to show your support. And to really talk about this as universal value. Again, our goals is to reach all 50 states, to make this a really big swing, and then to carry that momentum into other civic engagement, including voting, but beyond, building this coalition. So we're not just a lot of strong trees out there doing a lot of great work, but we're also a forest, and we actually have this power. That's from a friend across the river. But no, just really happy to be here with all of you to talk about this and to support in any way that you can. Reach out if you need any help. We have a great team here with UABB, ARSL, New York Public Library Queens, and us here in Brooklyn. So thank you so much.
To jump in on one more thing, we are hoping to have at least one, if not a few, sort of drop-in Zoom office hours for folks who maybe have something planned already and want to talk it through or need guidance. So we'll be sure that gets shared out. So it's pop in and out as you need and can, and our teams are happy to be available to give support, answer questions, talk through ideas, etc.
Yeah, so lovely to be here with all of you, and I'm going to pass this over to Philomena, I believe, at this point.
Yes. Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you to UABB ALA for having me. So I am Philomena Polifrone. I am the Advocacy Associate Manager with the American Booksellers Association, and I'm the point person for American Booksellers for Free Expression, which is our Freedom of Expression initiative. So I want to talk to you today a little bit about what ABA is, the role of booksellers in this fight, and then especially some ways that booksellers can get involved for this 1019 Day of Action, as they already are all this week for Banned Books Week and Let Freedom Read Day. So a little bit about ABA. We're a member organization representing over 2,000 bookstore companies and over 2,500 locations. So I think really important in getting to that all 50 states target for the 1019 Day of Action. I really hope booksellers can be a part of that. And we already are a part of the ongoing freedom of expression advocacy that is so important to fighting against this book ban crisis. We're small businesses. Politics who campaign on their support of small businesses are obliged to listen to some extent when we speak, and we're trying to mobilize that in terms of state legislative advocacy. We're potentially, at least for the many of our stores who are interested in doing this, organizing centers, places where people can gather and talk and share information when book bans come to their communities. And above all, we are that place in the community where people can find freedom in a book, because at least for now, and despite some of the legislative attempts to regulate bookstores and to kind of creep into the kinds of books that we can carry, or at least that we can sell to schools, we're able to be that place where people can find that book that is maybe targeted somewhere else. So as we move into this period of the end of Banned Books Week and trying to figure out how to build that momentum into a year-round organizing campaign, because as we all know, book bans do not stop at the end of Banned Books Week, right? So we need to figure out how to build that momentum. And I think culminating in Let Freedom Read Day and then pointing from the edge of Banned Books Week forward into this next date of 1019 is an extremely powerful opportunity to do that. And so here are a few ideas of things that bookstores can do. And I say this for any booksellers who are watching, whether live or watching later, but I also say it for community members and librarians who might want to reach out to your bookstore and sort of put this bug in their ear. So here's some of the ideas of things that someone can do on 1019. Banned books bingo. This is something that a lot of libraries do. It's also something that a lot of our member stores are doing this week for Banned Books Week. That's a perennial fave, right? Someone can learn about something on a Banned Books bingo event this week and then read that book by the time they get to 1019, right? Banned Books trivia, a why was this book banned thing. Do you know all 10 of the top banned books this year? Anything else like that that can kind of get into the present and history of book bans. A scavenger hunt. I've heard of some stores doing this where you have the list of top 100 banned books, see what's on our shelves. So these are just ways I think that people can kind of get out of the statistics and actually get into the shelves and start to see some of the ways that book bans impact what is available to them and the freedoms that they have as individuals. Another great idea for an event for a store is an author visit. You can reach out to Authors Against Book Bans, who are really, really good at finding, if not a banned author in your area, though there may be one, an author who is able to and excited to speak about the banned book crisis. So Authors Against Book Bans can be a great ally there, or reach out to local advocacy groups, friend of the library groups, to see if they want to hold some kind of event in the store that you can collaborate with them on. And I would say, I just want to emphasize that for any of these events, partnerships between bookstores and libraries can be extremely powerful. So one, it can be something like a library card drive that is hosted in a bookstore. So just to kind of share some of the people who are coming to the bookstore and making sure they know that there's a library there too. I have not met a single bookseller who is threatened by the idea of their local library, right? It's all part of the same mission. I would say, if you're a bookseller, reach out to your library, talk about it. If you're a library, reach out to your booksellers in your community. I would also say, again, see if there's a local Friends of the Library group that you can have for some kind of a talk about what that means, because those are so essential for supporting literary freedom around the country and for supporting the stability and independence of libraries around the country. But a lot of people don't even know that they exist. So that can be a good way to get the word out. And then, again, I just think that the 1019 event can be potentially a way where bookstores and libraries can start that kind of collaboration that they can then carry forward, so that if libraries are having author events and the author needs someone to come to the library to sell books so that they can, figure out a way to make it worth their PR person's while or worth their own while, a bookseller can show up and actually sell at an offsite event. So there are all sorts of partnerships that can happen there. But I also want to take a step back and talk about a project that we just announced today, which is a way that booksellers can actually provide kind of a safety net, but also a disincentive in communities where books are being banned. So it's called the Set Books Free Project. And what that is essentially a pipeline of banned and diverse books from independent bookstores and their customers to the communities that are being hardest hit by book bans. So the way that it would work is we, ABA and ABFI, play matchmaker between independent bookstores and grassroots organizations that are doing some kind of book access work. Once those matches are made, the independent bookstore can have a shelf of banned and diverse books that customers can buy for themselves, or they can buy to have donated to the grassroots organizations that the bookstore is supporting. And because what I've noticed is that, there's a lot of customers coming into the bookstore and saying, okay, I see the banned books display, my awareness is raised, but what do I do about it, right? What is some, easy, I'm a busy person, what's an easy way that I could do something about this? Buying a book for donation can be that easy way of doing it. But also, if we have enough such programs, and a ton of independent bookstores are already doing this, so the proof of concept is already there. If we have enough bookstores doing this, then there can be a disincentive to banning books. If they know that if you ban genderqueer, about 20 copies of genderqueer are suddenly going to appear circulating in the community, then there's a disincentive there. But it's also a way to make sure that the kids who most need to see themselves represented in literature can potentially have access to these books if and when they're banned in their community. So of course, this is not a replacement for supporting libraries and for supporting literary freedom in schools, but it's an additional way to make sure that they can't take away what kids need most, which is literature in which everyone can see themselves reflected. So I'm so excited about the 1019 event as a way to not only look forward to the advocacy that can happen over the rest of the year, but also potentially as a way to tie in with the Set Books Free project. It's a really good target date if you or your local bookstore wants to set up that program to launch it on 1019 as a way to say, here's what we're doing about it, and here's how you can help all year round. So thank you again for including me in this, and I'm happy to pass it to Becca Brown, the digital strategist who's working with the coalition.
Hi, y'all. Super happy to be here. We've sort of already covered some of the amazing ways that y'all can help us out on the 19th and the lead up to it. But I'm just going to go over some of them again, and I welcome questions as well for social media, because that's mainly what it is. But one of the links that we've shared is the Day of Action page that exists within the UABB website. And that has all of the information you should need to be able to uplift and amplify the day of the 19th. There are a good amount of posts across a bunch of different social platforms there. You'll also find downloadable, promotable materials that you can print out yourself and either place anywhere within the library, within a storefront, wherever you'd like. But all of these items will help promote the day of the 19th. And we'd love as much as possible for you to be able to help us in creating awareness about this day. We realize that partners and libraries across the country are the arms and legs of this day and ensuring that it really makes waves nationwide. And so having y'all help us out by posting again across social media, engaging with your community as much as you can on social media, using all of the graphic templates that we've placed on the page, and printing out materials however needed is the best way to sort of tell your community about what's happening, and hope that they will either attend an in-person event if they can by them, or reach their own online communities across social media. There's also going to be, as Robin had mentioned earlier, there's an ad campaign that we're launching. So if you see an ad, please do engage with it. But there are also a number of influencers that we've engaged across TikTok and across Instagram who will be speaking on behalf of the day of the 19th. Please feel free to share the videos that are created from these influencers with your own networks to be able to amplify this day again as much as possible.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our panelists. At this point, I'm going to start our Q&A session. We do have a few questions that came through. One question we have was about actually handling social media. In this case, we have one of the participants who, there's a comment war has been started on a post about Banned Books Week, stating one of the arguments stating that no books have been banned in America, and just how to properly respond. And I imagine many of our other participants might be anticipating similar situations as well. So I'd like to pose that to our panelists about ways to navigate that.
If it's cool, I'll go first because I get the same thing on the Banned Books Week pages. So, and I have done a lot of kind of trainings for librarians as far as social media safety goes. So, if it's your personal social media page, I mean, you can use the smite button at will, but if you're managing a page for a library or a public institution, one of the things I generally advise is you need to treat that page, if you have open comments, like an extension of your library, in that it is a limited public forum. It's not a space where everything goes, but you do need to be cognizant of being viewpoint neutral in your moderation as much as possible. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't establish kind of behavior rules like you do with your physical library space. Like you know, people aren't allowed to do certain things in the library, and you can do the same thing with your social media space. But you do want to be as cognizant as possible of being viewpoint neutral. I generally don't delete comments when somebody says books aren't being banned, because I kind of count on my followers to jump on them for me. But also, that's their opinion and they're entitled to their opinion. And as long as they're not being abusive in their interactions or breaking whatever kind of content rules you establish for your page, then just, you know, as a general rule, I let them stand. And, you know, one thing I would encourage you to do as an admin is don't feed the trolls. You know, don't, unless you think you're going to have success in engaging, don't engage. There's no requirement that you need to do so. But as much as possible, you do need to try, especially if it's for your library or if it's for a public institution, to be viewpoint neutral. And you may not agree with what they're saying, but as long as they're not breaking the rules you established for the page, you don't have much grounds for removal. Now, if you do have rules for your page, like, you know, certain types of content aren't allowed, like I don't allow people to sell their knockoff t-shirts. You know, make sure those rules are posted, pinned at the top of your page or are part of your kind of screening process for the page. And make sure that those are clearly posted. And I do tend to give people warnings if they're getting a little out of pocket, to say, hey guys, let's chill out. But you know, a lot of times these guys are just looking to get a rise. or it's a bot and they're just looking for clicks. So sometimes the best policy is to ignore them.
Yeah, I agree with everything Betsy said, and definitely defer to her in terms of specific library, like library specific things, I should say. I do just want to add 2 points. One is protecting your community when the comments are especially edging on the abusive. So that can mean posting and pinning some kind of comment about just letting people know what's going on in the comments below, but also whether you're a librarian or a bookseller or whomever, think about which staff you're tasking with dealing with it, especially given that there's like a lot of identity-based animus happening in these comments a little bit. Just protect your people, think about who's on the front lines of dealing with it, because that can really be harmful.
Thank you. All excellent answers from the BPL team or from Becca. Is there any other items you'd like to add to that question that have not already been addressed?
Yeah, I would say my number one recommendation when someone is sort of commenting and they're sort of engaging with others as well and commenting and tagging other folks and constantly going back and forth and responding is I would actually try and educate them if possible, not in a short way whatsoever. But I always think that there's benefit in sort of a quick response that is not super direct, but is informational. And then as well, actually in the note that you respond back with saying, we've sent you a DM, and sort of just moving that entire conversation to DMs. That sort of then just takes away the engagement from others and sort of bringing the conversation somewhere else entirely online that you would most definitely want to avoid, because the main purpose of the post is definitely to amplify and create good and awareness among the community. And so sometimes that person feels as though they've been sort of seen and heard when you move the conversation to the DMs and they've been able to get their point across.
Can I add one quick thing really quick to kind of reiterate Philomena's point about safety? If you have moderators for your page, check in with them and make sure they're okay. You know, because it can be a lot if there's a pile on, and some moderators have a thicker skin than others. I tend to think I'm one of the thicker skins, but I also grew up in the era of flame wars and and listservs. But yeah, check in with your moderators and make sure they're okay. And I'd also encourage anybody who's working in library education space to take steps to ensure their own personal safety on social media. You know, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to lock down social media, but there's something to be said for setting it to friends only and keeping it locked down to only people you trust.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about participating in the upcoming days of action? Any other questions or resources we can point you to? A few more minutes just to make sure that folks get a chance. All right. I think if that is it, I will go ahead and close us out. And if you have any remaining questions, please feel free to pop that in our Q&A function. And if we are not able to answer in this moment, we will reach out to you. So let us know your contact information. We will reach out to you. Oh, we do have one. In cities like Chicago, where banned books aren't so prevalent, is there a strategy to support places that are more repressive and have more book banning? That is an excellent question. Would any of our panelists like to take that of how we can come together and support each other?
I mean, I guess I would just briefly say that that's part of the rationale behind the Set Books Free project, is to try to help people who at least don't think that they're in high ban areas to get books where they're most needed. I would also say, so find some grassroots organizations you like in some of the like top 5 most banned states. Check out Florida, Texas. I can shout out the Lynx Watch in Florida as a place that does book donations. I can also shout out the Texas Freedom Network in Texas, Carabiner Collections in Texas, reach out to the Texas Freedom to Read Project. And Pride and Less Prejudice is another great organization with an incredible name. So donating books is a big one, but I would also say, you know, a lot of people who don't think that they're in an area where book bans are going to be an issue might find that they actually are. And being vigilant and getting in touch with your school board and being familiar with their policies ahead of time is the best way to make sure that that stays true, even if it is true.
Yeah, if I can piggyback off of that, I want to echo that you may not think it's happening in your community, but it's probably happening. And there have been communities in and around Chicago where we've had some very vitriolic board meetings and attempts at censorship. And so stay vigilant, pay attention to what's happening in your community. And it can flip on a dime. You know, everything can seem fine, and then one person decides it's time to go after a school board or a library, and it can go downhill from there. I myself am like, I'm in California, and California is allegedly this giant bastion of progressive liberal commies, but that's not actually the case. I live in a very purple, almost red county in California, and we've seen plenty of incidents here as well. What I would say is support the organizations that are doing the work, like the organizations represented here. Because we're not just doing, we're doing the work all over the country, and recognize like these smaller communities where this is happening, there are people who are trying to fight this, and for them it can feel very isolating. And so a lot of times coming in from the big city or coming in as an outside organization, that's at least doing it visibly, it's not very helpful. You know, I just to pick on Texas a little bit, Texas doesn't like it when outsiders interfere. And so if you know people in the community or know people who might know people in the community, kind of reaching out and saying, hey, what do you need? You know, how can we help you? Or letting an organization like ALA and United Against Book Bans know about a situation so that maybe we can find somebody we can support. I've worked with a lot of people who live in these tiny communities, and you know, one of the things that we enjoy when we live in large cities is a little bit of insulation, and the small communities don't have the same type of insulation. And so it becomes necessary to kind of do a little more kind of self-care and understanding about the kind of the pressures of small communities and how everybody knows each other, and this can tear a community like that apart in a very significant way. And so just exercising as much empathy as possible for those communities and supporting the organizations that are working with them.
I agree with all of that, and also just sort of like leaning into, if you are in a place that does have the privilege to speak out and carry messages and that sort of thing, to do so, and you can do at least that, and just sort of signal a sense of solidarity for people who might not have the privilege to do so, and then also just like trying to understand sort of like, yeah, it's not, you know, happening here in this community, but it probably is. You just have to sort of like make space for particularly young people who are oftentimes, you know, bearing the brunt of the, you know, book bans, challenges, access issues, that sort of thing. Create space for them to tell their stories and listen, and ask them what they want, because they're really the ones who are seeing this, you know, in this kind of moral panic about childhood and all and whatnot. Like, they're always the ones who are at the, you know, bearing the brunt of these kinds of attacks. So they'll know better than anyone almost what's actually happening. And then once you find out, you know, listen and then build some support around them immediately if you don't think that it's actually happening in your community.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's all very helpful information.
Actually, I had one more idea, Amelia.
Take it away.
Okay, so one thing you can do if it's not happening in your community is start inoculating your community. Like, work with your library to say, hey, can we start doing some intellectual freedom programming? You know, talk to your school boards and your city councils, get to know them, because if it does start happening and they know who you are, they're less likely to shut you down, or less likely to shut you down if you don't agree with what's happening. And so I think that there are proactive steps we can take in all of our communities to not just stay informed, but to also make sure that people know where we stand on the issues, and especially the people making decisions. And to establish an atmosphere of acceptance for the right to read and for a wide variety of materials and information access.
Thank you. And again, all wonderful ideas, and I think an excellent note to wrap up on. Just a reminder, as all the panelists have stated, that this is a nonpartisan American value, freedom to learn, the freedom to access information, the right to read, and this is something that we can come together on, and all of the ideas of supporting the people on the ground who know their communities best, amplifying their voices, finding out what they need, speaking out when we have the ability and privilege to do so, and inoculating our communities, reaching out to the people most affected, such as young people, all excellent ideas and all things that I think this momentum, energy that we're doing in Banned Books Week and upcoming Freedom to Read Community Day of Action can all help us do and plan to continue doing. So just to wrap up, I just want to thank once again all of our panelists for sharing information and ideas today. And I want to thank everyone who joined us live today and those who will be listening afterwards. As our panelists stated, this is a value that must be protected, and it is more important than ever that we show support for our local libraries, our local booksellers, and our community's right to read. We'll share resource links one more time, and to find out more about Let Freedom Read Day on September 28th, you can go to bannedbooksweek.org. And for more information about the Freedom to Read Community Day of Action on October 19th, go to unitagainstbookbans.org, and we have several links also coming through on the chat. We look forward to seeing everyone's ideas in action this week and next month, and thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amelia.